Welcome. Before starting the simulation, I would actually like to make a couple of remarks about the success or failure of change initiatives in organizations. Actually, if we look well, large organizations particularly launch on a regular basis these big projects, big change and innovation projects, which aim very often at basically improving our different functions. So these are functional projects where we take one of the processes and try to improve it because there are new technologies, because there are new ways of operating and so on. We inject innovation in the different processes. Other reasons for launching these big projects are more, let's call them structural reasons. So we realize that our company needs a different structure in order to operate. But basically what we are looking at is always one thing, the increase of our performance and sustainable performance, obviously. If you remember, towards the end of the 90s, there was this kind of big wave of what I call e-everything. All these projects where you could take whatever and put an E in front of it, and then you would have a good reason to launch a new project. So e-procurement, e-learning, e-business, and so on. And still today, companies are working on large projects like supply chain management projects, knowledge management projects, trying to have the knowledge flow better within the organization, or customer or supplier relationship management project. So one of the things we can observe, first of all, is that companies on a regular basis launch these big projects. Now, the reality, unfortunately, is that although change is necessary, otherwise our companies would not do it, in reality, change is very hard. Let's look at this number. It tells us that the large majority of change initiatives launched in large organizations tend to fail, and pretty miserably. We see also that when technology is involved, the rate of failures tends to be even higher. I don't know if you are surprised by this number. They are extremely high. And this means that companies incur high costs, first of all, in not achieving their objectives, and second, in running these projects, which then are not really successful. Now, just one remark, what means failure? Okay? In the ideal case, this is our expectation. Okay? We start the project with good intention, big announcement, like saying that's a very strategic project for the company, it's really important, we are putting our best resources, we are putting our best people on it. And then after the launch, there is typically a relatively long time where we basically have to unlearn, to relearn, because change doesn't happen like that, just because we formulate it. It needs some time to adapt. But after this time is over, we expect effectively to start seeing some measurable performance improvement and achieve our final objective. This is kind of the ideal case of a successful change or collaboration project. Now, in reality, unfortunately, what we see is slightly different. Let's look first at this pattern. This is one we see, unfortunately, very often. These projects also start with a big announcement, this is a very important project, the best people, and so on, like I was saying before. But then, unfortunately, whenever you go in and try to measure any form of impact that this project is having on performance, on success, it is perfectly flat. That's why we call these the no take-off breakdown, because the project never takes off in terms of really producing results. Okay? You might have seen projects like these, hopefully not in your company, perhaps in your competitors or in other companies, but unfortunately they happen a lot, up to almost 30% of the cases, and there are many, many factors which lead project to never take off. Now, a second pattern that we see very often is the second one, which I tend to call something like the illusion of change, because quickly, even earlier than expected, you might start seeing results. But the key point is that very often these results are not sustainable. We come quickly to a point where people realize this is not sustainable. We can not work anymore in this way. And then what do? They go back to the good old previous way of working. That means basically people have gone back and we haven't achieved anything, which again reminds us that the key concept also when it comes to change is sustainability. If we don't have sustainability, basically we don't have any type of results, and we have to be careful about this. And the third pattern I would like to mention, because although this pattern is, we find it very often in organization, is this one, where actually we don't achieve what we want, but we kind of plateau a little bit earlier. We reach a certain level of results, at least compared to the first pattern, we have some results, but it's not really the type of continuous development that we were expecting. When does this happen? It happens, for instance, when we set targets and then kind of push people, force people to achieve these targets without really understanding what is behind. We have seen this, for instance, a lot in projects related to total quality management, where people get told we need an ISO certification. So people start filling the database, making the procedures, and then actually they get the ISO certification. So we come here. But then what happens, that if you go a couple of months later into this company and ask them to show you the data and the procedures, basically you discover that nobody is really responsible for carrying on, for following up, and that actually all this exercise about quality was done only because the boss wanted to have this ISO certification. So in many companies we see how change is driven by setting ambitious objectives like let's get this certification, let's pass this level, but without people really understanding what is behind. And the next time you want change, you have to set again an objective. People will get into a firefighting mode, they will achieve the objective, but then nothing will remain. So again, even this, from a change perspective, is a failure because the change is not sustainable. The pace of change, in this case, is not sustainable, and we don't come really there where we would like. So basically, just to close this motivational piece, I would like to suggest you, first of all, also to reflect about different patterns, okay? And try to identify within your company which are the projects which effectively are successful. Are there, for instance, more than 25% or not? Because one mistake that many companies do is the one of basically ignoring all the projects which have not been successful. And then what happens? If we ignore them and don't try to analyze what were the factors associated with these failures, it is very likely that in 6 months we relaunch a new project, and again with a new project leader, and then we see how the company goes exactly through the same pattern. That means there was no learning. If we have no learning from the analysis of projects which didn't work, then obviously it is not very likely that we will improve our rate of success. Unfortunately, this is something which happens in many companies.